Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. Today's guest is one that you are all probably very familiar with, Bogi Lateiner, who has a resume that is very, very long. So I'll try to hit the cliff notes here. But you might know her from All Girls Garage on MotorTrend. She's also the founder and host of With Her Two Hands, founder and owner of Girl Gang Garage, and a brand ambassador for our friends over at the Tech Force Foundation. Bogi, how are you doing this morning?
I'm fantastic. Thanks so much for having me.
I feel like I didn't even start to I didn't do it due justice. Your background is incredible. You've done some amazing things with your life.
I don't know about all that, but all of the things like underneath it all, like I'm a master auto mechanic, and that's my trade, that's my passion, and that's how it all started. Right, was by being an auto mechanic, and everything else just kind of follows that and follows the trajectory of like what it is to be a mechanic in this world as a woman. And so everything in my career, everything in my life is about improving the industry and improving the experience of women in the industry. So it all just comes down to like I'm a mechanic.
Well, in my research before doing this show, one of the things that I found fascinating is that your real name isn't Bogi. And as probably obvious as that would be to you, in looking, it blew me away. How did you come up with the name Bogi?
So it goes back way, way long ago when I was a small child. No, when I was 16 years old, I lived in Hungary for a year when I was in high school. I was an exchange student. And so it was a nickname my friends gave me when I was living there. And for various reasons, it stuck. There's like the short version, the long version, and the really long version. But short version is Bogi is short for Boglarka, type of flower, but it's also Bogi by itself is kind of like a nickname, like a quiche bogart is like a little bug or a little beetle. So a Bogi is a beetle, and beetles are what got me started in cars. They're the gateway drug, so it all kind of fit.
It was such a cool story when I read about it. And I think it's done so much for your branding as a person and really, you don't, it's such a unique name. It's not something you hear commonly. So people can refer to you as it's almost that one name type of person, right? Which is really cool. I think it's brilliant.
Well, with a last name like Lateiner, you have to have a first name that actually stands out because nobody can pronounce my last name. You know what that's like.
Yes. We talked about it before we hopped on the show. Goninen, I don't expect anybody to try and understand that. And when I order
No.
pizza, I'll use my wife's maiden name. I'll use
Right.
my first name, anything but Goninen, because we'll be there for a half an hour trying to spell that.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
so I, it started with you early on in becoming a mechanic, a technician. What drove you that direction in the first place? I mean, was it just a curiosity of wanting to learn about cars?
No, I could give two craps about cars, honestly, when I was young. I I didn't grow up around cars. My parents don't know where I came from. And I guess I should edit that. My father and I would go to like little local car shows in the neighborhood, but like we're talking teeny tiny car shows, and it was dad reminiscing about the old cars, and it was me looking like, oh, that's a pretty color. I like that one. I wasn't into cars. I didn't grow up around it. I was a total little hippie kid. I was a 16-year-old dreadlocked hippie kid who marched on Washington protesting all of the things and doing all the stuff. And I, like a good little hippie kid, loved Volkswagen Bugs. And I thought that they were fun. They were full of personality. They had this character to them, and I loved that element of it, the storytelling element of it, and it drew me to it. That each of them was so different, and they all had their own story and their own personality, and so I wanted one. And it honestly was the the reaction that I got from both the automotive industry as well as the society as a whole when I started to pursue like just just learning about bugs. Like I just simply wanted to know what year I should buy, right? And like I start reading Volkswagen magazines just to figure out, like, is there a year I should stay away from? I don't know. And all I saw were women in high heels and bikinis and a bunch of dudes talking about this car that they built. And that bothered me. And so I decided I wanted to take auto shop in high school, not because I gave a crap about cars, but because I wanted to prove a point. I wanted to show, I guess, prove to myself that I could do it. I wanted to prove to other people that women could do this. I've always been a little bit of a contrarian. Like, you tell me I can't do something, watch me. And so the more pushback I got, the more resistance I got, the more it made me want to do it. And then I fell in love with it kind of despite myself. Like, I didn't expect to fall in love with it.
I think that chip on your shoulder goes so far, though, right? Because for anybody in anything, that if, I think if your mentality or in your mindset is right, that can be a really powerful tool for you to drive you to success.
It can be a double-edged sword. I mean, I think like anything, sometimes your strongest trait or your most valuable trait is also your biggest Achilles heel too. I think having that angst kind of drove me, and it drove me to prove a point, and it really lit a fire under my butt. It made me want to prove people wrong. But as I think I got older, I think sometimes it held me back too, because I would often walk into situations expecting a fight, even when there wasn't one yet. Right. And 99% of the time I was right. There was a fight there to have, right? Like there was stuff happening. But I think sometimes we can, I don't know, it can be a hindrance too, having that angst. So it's a double-edged sword.
As you say that, I think you spoke directly to me there, because I think I have a very similar personality and a very similar thing where it almost drives that, I don't know, like tension almost. Like it is such a weird thing, because it is something where if you have a perceived slight against you and you use that chip throughout your career, it can create that. I love the way you say that, where you're almost looking for that fight.
Yeah.
And I think I've noticed that in my career too. So when you said that, I was like, my gosh, it feels like I'm looking in a mirror here.
Well, I think ironically, and I know we're kind of jumping ahead here, but I think ironically, like what women in the industry face, what I've faced in this industry is very similar to what this industry as a whole faces within society, right? Like I anticipated a fight because 90% of the time there was a fight, right? 90% of the time I'd walk into a shop and people would treat me differently because I was a woman, whether I was there as a customer or whether I was there as an employee or whether I was there as whatever. And I think the same issue happens within our industry, is that, we're an industry fighting to be respected and fighting to be seen as worthy, and yet 90% of the time, and maybe not even that much, maybe it's only 50% of the time, we act out the stereotypes that we're trying to destroy. And so the fight is there, right? It's like people don't trust mechanics because there's a lot of mechanics who are not trustworthy. And that chip on the shoulder can sometimes mean that they don't trust one that is trustworthy. There's women have a chip on their shoulder about the industry because 90% of the time we deal with being treated poorly because we're women. And maybe that chip sometimes means that we don't give someone the benefit of the doubt when they really are an ally. But it makes sense why that chip happens, right? If that makes sense. Yeah. Am I being too crazy here?
I think what you just outlined there is a perfect comparison, and something that, I think drives a lot of us in the industry is that we do want to change that perception. But in order to do that, we have to have, we can't have bad apples. We can't have bad actors in this, where we actually need to have an industry that we can stand behind. And I love the fact that you compare it to your experience as a woman in the industry, because I do think there's a lot of parallels there. And in a lot of ways, they go hand in hand, because if we're not accepting to women, or we're not accepting to people outside of our normal network, we're part of the problem, right? Like we're not helping to grow the industry.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that the two issues are very parallel and very combined. As long as the industry has a bad reputation, no parents are going to want their little girl to go be a part of it, right? And women are going to still feel intimidated going to shops. And there's like all of these things that kind of go hand in hand. And if we want to see more gender diversity, and if we want to see women actually having positive experiences, both as consumers and as employees and participants within the industry, there's a whole lot that needs to change and is all very interconnected.
It is. And I want us to get to the point to where when we're at a cocktail party and we say, somebody asks you, what do you do? And you say, well, I'm an automotive technician or a diesel technician. That it's not something you're saying out of embarrassment, but something that you're looked at with high regard, right? And I think in the past, that's not always been the case. When you're out with your friends and somebody brings that up, maybe you try to hide from that. I know I did early in my career, and I really want to help push it to the level of respect that it deserves. But for those technicians that are out there listening to this right now, we have to act in a way that gains respect, that brings respect, because we have a TikTok channel, and Val on our marketing team does a fantastic job on there. But when you read the comments of the videos, you're like, my goodness, we're going backwards. This is embarrassing for us.
Yeah, no, 100%. I was actually thinking about that this morning as I was thinking about our conversation that we were going to have today. And like, respect is something, whether individually or as a company or whether as an entire industry, respect is not something that's demanded. Respect is something that's earned by acting in a way that is worthy of respect. And I do think the automotive industry deserves respect. We work on rolling computers, right? We work on space shuttles. We work on such complicated vehicles, and we're in charge of making sure that people stay safe, their families stay safe while they make the rest of the world work. Like, we need auto mechanics, we need diesel technicians, we need airplane and train mechanics. Like, they are crucial to the survival of our world. However, if we want to be respected, we need to show that professionalism. And often we shoot ourselves in the foot with that by doing this. Well, they should just respect us because we're important. Like, okay, that's cool. You are important. And how much we get paid, how well we're treated by society, whether we can hold our head up high when we say that we're a technician and have people be like, wow, that's awesome. That comes down to us, like how we behave. And the future is up to us. Like, what we do every day, how we interact with people every day is going to determine how people see our entire industry. As a woman, I experienced very quickly that how people interacted with me as a woman was going to determine how they experienced every other female technician that came after me, right? Like, if I was the first female mechanic that they ever experienced, then every female mechanic after that was going to get judged based on whether, what their experience of me was. So I had to be good. I had to be worthy. I had to show that I was competent, because I knew that other women were going to get judged based on their experience of me. And I think that's something that we as an industry need to remember in general, is that if we're the first mechanic that somebody is meeting or interacting with, all future mechanics, like the rest of tradespeople, are going to be judged based on you and their interaction and experience of you.
I think that's very powerful. I think it's really I think it's reflective of what a trailblazer you've been in the industry. And I think it's really important that little girl that's out there that might have aspirations to work with her hands sees somebody else out there doing the same thing as she wants to do, right? I think being able to have that visibility sets the stage for their career moving forward.
Oh, 100%. If she can see it, she can be it. And on the same note, if he can see it, he can believe it, right? The more exposure we have, more visibility of women doing trades work, whether it's automotive or construction or electrical or whatever it is, any sort of trades work. The more little girls can see it, the more moms can see it, the more dads can see it, the less of a stigma it becomes, and it becomes more normal, to where my hope one day is that I'm not a female mechanic. I'm just a mechanic, and that I don't need that gender qualifier, and that it doesn't matter that I'm just a technician, because the tools don't care. The car doesn't know, right?
That should be a t-shirt. The tools don't care.
Yeah. I actually have stickers that say it, and shirts coming soon. So
all right. We'll make sure to add a link to those shirts and decals. That would be awesome. I want one of those for sure. I'll definitely be buying one. How do you think the show has helped that acceptance? Because I've watched the show a lot. I think you ladies do such a great job on it, and you're doing real work. I mean, when I watch the show, you do such a good job with explaining what you're doing. And again, it's visibility to strong females doing some great work.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been really interesting to be a part of the show it's been 12 years now that I've been on the show, since it first started. And the reception from the audience, or from the social media comments, right, has changed a little bit over the years. When we first came out, we got a lot more negativity. We get less now. We get less now. We get a lot of support now, which is really cool to see, and that makes me really happy to see. But I have to give a lot of acknowledgement and credit to my production company, because before I started All Girls Garage, I had gotten approached by a number of production companies, and so many of them wanted to do the drama angle, right? We're going to put a bunch of girls in a house together, and they're going to open up their own shop. And really what they wanted was catfights and drama, right? And I so applaud that my production company was like, that is not what this is about. Like, yes, it's going to be all female, but it's really about the cars, and it's about doing the work, and it's about educating. And they kind of, yes, it's in the name, it's All Girls Garage, but like they kind of made it a non-issue in a lot of ways. We're still to this day the only all-female automotive show. And yes, there's women in other car shows, and that's great. But it's interesting, and I really applaud that they made it. They didn't overdo it, right? That it wasn't like, it's a bunch of girls, yay! Like, we just happened to be female.
I hope they learned from some of the other shows, because you could tell, the shows that I think we all grew up watching and loving, that they tried to push them to that dramatic angle.
Yeah.
And it's almost off-putting, right? Because so many people just want to see the work and see how talented these folks are on TV. And I don't know, maybe it gets the immediate rating, but once that kind of wears off, and it just kind of another show.
Well, I think that was an era too. Like, there was a point in time when like reality TV was like new, and everybody really wanted the drama. I actually had a production company before All Girls Garage started come out to my shop and tell me, we think you're great. We love your shop. We love your team. We love your customers. We love you. We think you're great. The problem is, and I quote, "You're not enough of a bitch for TV."
What?
That's what I was told. I said, okay, if I need to be a bitch to be on TV, then I don't want to be on TV. They wanted the drama. They wanted the drama.
Oh my goodness. How thick of skin did you have to have in those early days?
Oh my goodness. Very, it always cracks me up. Like when I do speak out against the sexism and against the, just all the crap that I dealt with as a woman in this industry, let alone a woman on TV in this industry, right? Because that's a whole nother layer of crap. Anytime I speak up about it, I inevitably will get somebody commenting, calling me a snowflake, or that I'm like too sensitive and woe is me. And I'm like, okay, for 25 years in this industry, I have had to have the thickest skin just to survive and go to work every day. There's nothing about, this isn't about sensitivity. This is about speaking out and saying that it's not okay, right? Like,
I
I
can't imagine. I mean, and hopefully it's gotten better over the years as maybe there is more visibility to it, but I cannot imagine 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And luckily, maybe, I guess 12 years ago now is what, 2011?
Yeah, when the show started, yeah. But I've been in the industry since 2000.
Man.
Yeah. And it was hard. It was definitely hard. Things are changing. They have not changed. but they are changing. You mentioned that I do a podcast, the With Her Two Hands podcast, and that every week I sit down with a different tradeswoman, and it's from all across the trades and all across the world. It's not just the United States; it's Ireland and Canada and Australia and England, and it's the same stories over and over again, regardless of age or generation or country or trade. It's so many of the similar stories, and I am seeing more positive stories. I am hearing more women who say, yes, I had great support and I had great mentors, and being a female was a non-issue. So I am hearing more of that, but I'm also still hearing 20-year-olds who are saying that they've gotten laughed out of shops and told that they had no right to be there and that women don't belong in this space, and or that they've been grabbed or touched inappropriately or straight up sexually assaulted. So it's yes and no. I think it is getting better. We are seeing more of the good, but the bad still outweighs the good, unfortunately.
And it's funny because we've done different types of content about getting more women into the industry, and one of the things I noticed was that I had blind spots from my time in industry that I wasn't aware of until I stepped onto this side, onto the WrenchWay side. And one of those things that when I look back at it, I'm like, I'm an idiot. Like, how did I not see this? But like, we had a roundtable, and one of the young ladies that was on the roundtable was like, listen, if we just had uniforms that fit us correctly, that would be a win. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I never thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how like it really is the little things. Like I know there's like certain phrases that people get kind of like start to get irritated with because I hear them all the time. This like phrase of like microaggressions, right? Like it's true. Like sometimes it's the overt sexism that's irritating, that's exhausting. There's the sexual harassment and there's the all of the stuff. But then even in a great setting, even with great people, there are these little microaggressions, these little tiny things that are just a chip every day that says you're not welcome here, you don't belong here, subtly and subconsciously, like not having a locker room or a bathroom or not having uniforms that fit. And it sounds like we're being petty, like, oh, uniforms, whatever, like big deal, get over it. It's unsafe. It is unsafe for me to be wearing uniforms that do not fit me. And it's uncomfortable. And it is a subconscious daily reminder that I don't belong there, that I am an outsider. And it does, it wears on you over time, and it is exhausting. But yeah, just uniforms that fit. When I was in tech school, I wore little boys' Timberlands because nobody made steel toes for women at the time. And I couldn't find steel toes that fit me because my feet are too small for men's shoes. But I had to, while I was going to school, I had to wear work shoes, but I couldn't find any that were steel toes. So I wore fake ones. They were like little boys' Timberlands because they looked like work boots.
Wow. It really is. I think when we start to, as an industry, open our eyes a little bit, I think some of this stuff starts to become obvious. But even you saying that, there, again, another blind spot for me that I probably didn't know when I was in industry or when I was going to tech school. We had, our female population at UTI was very small. I mean, there was less than a handful in a gigantic class, right? And I don't know that I ever even thought of that, right? When I was going through school, and you look back and you're like, I wish I would have been maybe a little bit more attentive to that, especially when I moved into management type of roles.
Right. Well, and I appreciate that. And at the same time, I will say, like, it's not necessarily the onus goes both ways. You didn't know about it because we weren't talking about it. And maybe if you thought about it and really like took the time to be like, I wonder what that's like. But it's natural for fish in water to not know that they're wet, right? Like you don't know what you don't know. And if nobody's speaking up about it, then how are you going to know? And I think that's it's always a double-edged sword. Like, yes, it's great to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes. And we need to be having these conversations. And that's why I'm so hopeful that there are so many conversations that are starting to happen around women in the trades. And in small gatherings and large gathering corporate settings at conferences, that conversation is starting to happen, and it is through that awareness that things will change. So we haven't changed yet, but we're having the conversations, and that makes me hopeful.
This week's episode of Beyond the Wrench is brought to us by Jasper Engines and Transmissions. Okay, your customer's engine or transmission has failed, but now is not the time for them to trade their vehicle. Not without a working engine or transmission. Besides, would they have kept their vehicle another 3 to 5 years if their engine or transmission had not let them down? If you answered yes, then Jasper Engines and Transmissions is your choice to give your customer's vehicle new life and many thousands of miles of enjoyable driving performance. When considering the high cost of a new or newer used vehicle, there's a pretty good case to be made for replacing a drivetrain component that has failed or is delivering poor performance. Rather than trading their car, truck, van, or SUV, install a quality remanufactured Jasper product for less than your customer would have to invest in a new vehicle or a newer used vehicle. Check out their website at jasperengines.com to learn more about the money-saving value of Jasper. Another thing that I think is really, really neat that you did, and I think this speaks to the volume, or maybe not volume, to the professionalism in general of you in trying to evolve this industry, was that you gave a TED Talk. And I watched the TED Talk. It was amazing. And I think what you did in doing that is you're elevating the industry, because you're showing, hey, here's a technician that is very smart, that's carved out a crazy good career. How do you think that helps kind of push maybe the outside perception of the general technician, not even just female technician, but technician in general, into a better place?
I mean, that's my hope, right? And I struggle personally because I love this industry and I want to see it succeed and I want to see it get the respect that it deserves. And so I'm really passionate about kind of bringing that forward. And then sometimes I get really frustrated with the industry, and I'm like, you come across the folks that are living out the stereotype, and you're like, you are why we're struggling as an industry. Dang it! And so I get really frustrated, and I feel like it's important to talk about the negatives too. But I don't ever want that to be a hindrance. Like, yes, the negatives are real. Yes, they exist. If we don't talk about them, they won't change, right? We have to talk about the negatives or they'll never go away. However, that being said, like, I do love the industry. I think it's worthy of respect. I love people at the folks in the industry. We are an industry full of some amazing people, some bad seeds, but some amazing people. And I think the message needs to get out. We talk to ourselves, we talk to each other about how awesome we are as an industry, but John and Jane Doe out there, the parents, the influencers, the guidance counselors, the teachers, the folks who are customers at our shops, like all of the rest of the world they're the ones who need to hear it if they're going to ever support their kid going into this career, or if they are going to ever be comfortable paying a lot of money at a shop and feel like it's worth it, right? All of those things are all tied together. And we need the rest of the world to know how challenging this industry is and how intelligent you have to be to work on these cars. And that's the message that needs to get out, right? Is that this is not your great grandfather's mechanics anymore. This is not spark plugs and setting points. This is rocket science. And the kids that go into this work today, the folks that are excelling at it today, are literally rocket scientists, and they have to be so smart and so good to work on these cars. And it's just getting more crazy because we've got cars that are driving themselves now. And the people who are working on them, like, they got to be qualified.
I had that conversation. I was actually, this morning before coming into work, I was reading MotorTrend magazine, and I was reading a technical article. I like to stay on top of that as much as I can. And I turned to my wife, who was getting coffee, and I just said, if the general population knew how advanced this stuff is and how difficult it is, they would be blown away. But
They'd be
I feel like
terrified.
they would be terrified. But there's so much of our industry that doesn't do a good job telling the story, right? We don't
Right.
do a good enough job of explaining how challenging this is.
Right. Yeah, and some of that is like technicians' ego, right? Like, let's be honest, like we don't do a great job of breaking things down and explaining them to the person who doesn't understand. It's a highly technical field, and we want to sound like we like know our stuff because technicians have. We have some egos. Let's be honest, guys. And so we don't always do a great job of communicating that or sharing that. And then I think there's also the challenge that a lot of folks that get into automotive because they don't like people very much. They like cars that don't talk back to them. And so they may not be the best communicators. And that doesn't mean that they're not smart or that they're not intelligent. It's just they're smart in different ways, right? And so we have that barrier on top of it, as well as decades and generations of bad stereotypes and the fact that it has changed, right? Back in the day, it may have been true that you became a mechanic when you weren't able to do anything else. That's not the case anymore, right? It is not the case. These cars are so complicated. I read a study once that said that the average American believes that the average auto mechanic owns $5,000 worth of tools. And I like spit my drink out. Like when I read that, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like my toolbox costs twice that. Like, when in reality, the average mechanic owns over $100,000 worth of tools in their lifetime. And that's another thing. Like if the public knew that, it's an interesting conundrum. We live in a world that is so dependent on tradespeople, and they have so little understanding of what tradespeople do and how instrumental they are to making the world work. And then we have this disconnect in the communication between them. And it's a big riff and it's challenging. It's a really challenging ball to untangle.
I think another kind of additional layer to being able to provide transparency and being able to really tell the stories of the people in the shop is getting the people in the shops to be comfortable. And I think that's what you're alluding to with the different technician personalities. But I remember being in a shop, and had I been on something with social media or in a newspaper or something like that and walk back into the shop, I can just hear the comments in my head from the other people in the shop, right? Hey, Hollywood, like,
you get made fun of.
Yes, yeah. 100%. So, to see that you've gone above and beyond, but like at the time, I remember like I would have been so embarrassed to be on anything.
Oh yeah. Oh, I got made fun of. I got made fun of when the folks at the dealership I worked at found out that I had gone to college.
What?
So I was embarrassed to tell people that I'd gone to college. So like we deal with stuff from the outside world, but we also deal with stuff from internally. And that's the challenge. There's all of these layers of stuff that are really challenging to untangle. But yeah, absolutely. I get made fun of for being on TV. I get made fun of we just make fun of each other. That's just what we do, right? We have a culture of making fun of each other, and it's cute and it's funny and it's shop talk and la la la, and we can justify it all we want, but like it's not okay. Like I'm not a fan of the shop hazing and the shop talk and the BS. Like there's a line and it gets crossed all the time in the shop.
A lot. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, another thing I want to get your opinion on is I think some of the reason why maybe we have a little bit of a brand identity crisis, I'll call it, with the general public, is that when you go to that cocktail party and you say, well, I'm a technician, I think we lose a little bit with like regard to mechanic versus technician. I feel like if you go to a cocktail party and you say I'm a mechanic, people know what you're doing. Whereas if you say you're a technician, there's a pharmacy technician, there's there's all these different kinds of technicians. So if you say automotive technician, I'm guessing they kind of follow along, but at some level, I almost feel, and I get that the mechanic piece maybe not as descriptive of what we're doing nowadays compared to a technician description, but does that matter? Am I thinking of that wrong?
I don't know. I think we could talk about just that for like an hour, is mechanic versus technician. Because I know a lot of folks who say, I'm not a technician, I'm a mechanic. Technician is this like hoity-toity sterilization of what I do. Like, I'm proud to be a mechanic, right? That's one of the arguments that I hear. And then the other argument on the other side that I hear is, I'm proud to be a technician. I'm not like a dirty grease monkey. I am a qualified, educated, skilled, highly evolved technician. And so they become polarized as far as the words and like what they mean. And I think I understand arguments on both sides. Like,
Same.
I kind of personally feel like I was a technician when I worked at the dealership, because that's all I did. But then when I left and started working on everything and I had to just figure things out, that's when I became like a mechanic, like, and then I could work on anything. And so I kind of see both sides, but I also believe in the branding, like that the word technician and automotive technician was a rebrand, and it was an attempt at saying, all right, the society isn't going to come around and suddenly start seeing mechanics as respectable. So let's give us a new word, right? It's like, I'm not a housewife, I'm a domestic engineer. It's still the same thing. And underneath it all, the job is worthy of respect, right? No matter what you call yourself, you are worthy of respect. The rebrand was an attempt to tell the world, hey, the folks that are working on your car are working on rolling rocket ships.
I think that's a fair point, and I actually think the same exact thing. And I'll see the argument on some social post or something like that, and I think we think about it as an industry far more than the general public does, right? The general public just want their car fixed,
right? Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's going to become more of an issue, though. I think, we're seeing autonomous vehicles. I literally just drove an autonomous Uber ride yesterday for the first time. No driver. Crazy. The future is here, guys. Like, literally, the future is here. That is going to push the issue. The supply chain issues that we had surrounding COVID, I think, were just a teaser of what's going to start happening. I think, unfortunately for our world, we're not going to realize that there's a problem until it's in crisis, until it's almost too late, right? But we are in crisis. It's going to start being felt by the general public really soon, because if there's nobody to fix the trucks, if there's nobody to fix the farm equipment, if there's nobody to fix the cars and the trains and the buses, like, our world comes to a screeching halt. And suddenly technicians can demand anything they want, the good ones, right? And that time, I think, is coming really soon, because we are in such high demand. And then we've got these autonomous vehicles that, like, oh my God, I don't want just anybody working on them, right? Like, I want the most respectful, like, like highly skilled, highly trained, highly qualified person, because it's driving itself. So like all these issues are coming, and it's like a pressure cooker, and like, stuff's going to have to change soon.
Yeah. I look at it, I do think it's even more challenging in our industry right now, because the ICE vehicles, the internal combustion engines vehicles, they're not going away anytime soon, but then you're adding this additional layer on top of that, of the autonomous vehicles, of the EVs, of everything. And it's going to be a real challenge to our industry to be able to service all of this. Already is.
It already is, and it's just getting more so. And I think it's getting harder and harder for the independent shop. Like, I had a general repair shop for 13 years. I loved it. I loved my customers and my community, and my team. And there's many a day where I regret selling it. Like, I miss it dearly. However, when I look at like all of the training and the upkeep and how much I spent on keeping my technicians trained every year, even 5 years ago, and it's accelerated dramatically. It's like, it's a lot. It is a lot to keep up with, the amount of technology, the amount of diagnostic equipment, the amount of education. Like, it's going to be harder and harder for small shops to stay in business, just from a feasibility standpoint. And if we don't raise our rates, if we don't raise our prices, we're going to go out of business. but we can't raise our prices until we raise our reputation so that people are willing to pay the money. And so it all is interconnected.
I absolutely love that you just said that, because that is, I think, a lot of the core issue of our industry in general is the labor rates aren't where they should be. And I think it's a lot of, you are trying to gain that trust, and especially for an industry that we had to change the name of our title to change the perception of what we do. And so you're trying to gain trust from the general public while raising prices. And what you said about having to tell the stories of these folks in the shops and what we're having to do, both independent and dealer. I mean, everybody's having to adapt to this, and it takes a lot more training. It takes way crazy sophisticated tools.
Yeah.
If the general public doesn't know any different, they're just going to assume that you're ripping them off. And
right.
We cannot have that again.
Yeah. If we don't share that story, if we still are stuck in this old mindset of like no employees behind, no customers behind this door, employees only, like nobody can come out into the shop, and we're going to use big words to confuse you, and we're going to obfuscate the issue as much as we possibly can. If we keep going that route, like if we keep doing things the way they've always been done, like we're going to fail. We absolutely have to start bringing people in and helping them understand what this industry is all about, helping them see that picture. And we have to truly change our culture and how we interact with the customers. And the crazy thing to me is that the bar is so low that it's so easy. It's so easy to impress the heck out of a customer because the bar has been set so low, and their stereotype in their mind of what they're going to experience walking in a shop it's so easy to wow them by just treating them with respect and like decent human beings, right? And it's this, right? And it's the same for employees too, right? Because shops are like, oh, we can't find techs. Nobody wants to be a technician. I'm like, maybe look at yourself, right? Maybe would you want to work at your shop, right? Are you would you work for that money? Would you work in those conditions? Like maybe if nobody wants to work in our industry, we got to look at why and maybe do things a little bit different. And the bar is set so low for how we've treated technicians as shops that it takes so little to impress. Treat them well, treat them with respect, pay them well, give them the tools that they need. Right? It's really easy. It's really easy.
There are still bad apples out there, though. And
yeah.
I refer to a conversation we had. I mean, this is within the last few months, where we had a shop reach out to our sales team. They wanted to sign up for our platform on WrenchWay. And part of that is we asked that they post salary and just a lot of different information to allow a technician to do their due diligence. And this shop told our salesperson that he didn't want to post salary because he didn't pay well. And the reason he didn't pay well is because he didn't want to give his technicians disposable income to be able to take their families on vacation. And
right.
what you talked about earlier was that you have those frustrations with the industry, and that, we're out there screaming from a mountaintop how great this industry is. But then when you hear something like that, you're just like, it is so infuriating and frustrating when we're just out there battling to get our industry in a better place, and you hear that.
Totally. And there's sadly so much of it still, right? There and in the dealership world too, there you see a lot of that. Like the suits come through and they're like, oh, that technician just bought a boat, I must be paying him too much, right? Like you should be paying them more, right? Like there's still that mindset within our industry that technicians are second-class citizens and shouldn't have too much disposable income, shouldn't have too much money, shouldn't have time off, or how about this, even shouldn't have fun. Like I had this old school mentality, right? It's so ingrained. I posted a video. This was like a year or so ago. I posted a video of myself and another woman working on one of the builds at our shop, which is a volunteer-based build, by the way. This is not a job. This is not paid. It's volunteer-based. And we were dancing while we were doing body work. And I got like 2 or 3 comments from like old dudes who were like, if this was my shop, you wouldn't have time to play around like that. You'd be too busy working. And I just laugh because I'm like, or like maybe if we allow our employees to have fun at work, they will be more likely and more willing to work harder, because when you treat people well and if they enjoy their work environment, they're going to put in extra time. They're going to put in extra work. What a concept. But it's that old school mindset.
And they might actually like coming to work.
Right. What a concept. And they might want to come back the next day. Like, come on. It's not a bad thing to enjoy work. It really isn't.
I think that is one of my biggest concerns about our industry is I do think we're having a lot of good conversations now, whether it's getting more females into the industry or just improving the industry as a whole. But when you hear some of these real stories that are happening in the shops every day, and then you see technicians leaving the industry, you can't blame them in some cases because they've probably been burned a couple of times. And, as great as we say the industry is at times, we still have so far to go. Technicians, have you checked out WrenchWay yet? WrenchWay is a free online community for automotive and diesel professionals. Whether you're looking for a job or not, WrenchWay makes it easy to explore new opportunities, stay up to date on what's going on in the automotive and diesel communities in your area, and helps improve and promote the technician profession. Check out all of the job details you care about before you apply or interview with WrenchWay Top Shops. Details like photos of the shop and answers to the questions you actually care about instead of the same old copy and paste job description you see everywhere else. Open to new job opportunities but don't want to apply yet? Create an anonymous reverse job post and let shops reach out to you and see what's going on with the industry in your area through WrenchWay's Shop Talk. Join the WrenchWay online community for free by visiting wrenchway.com or by downloading the WrenchWay mobile app. Link is in the show notes. I had a technician tell me, we talk a lot about the technician shortage. And, I say a lot of times we talk about it ad nauseum because any trade publication you open, anything you look at regarding our industry is talking about the technician shortage.
Yeah.
And I had a technician reach out to me and he said, Jay, why would I want this to get any better? And he said the reason why he sees it through his eyes is that he's being treated as well as he ever has. He's being paid better than he ever has. All of these things are like he's getting the respect that he's been trying to get for so long. And it took pushing our industry into a corner to get them to do that. That's like, yeah, I get it.
No, I 100% get it. And he's got a valid point there, right? Like it's that whole thing, like nothing changes until it's too uncomfortable to stay the same, right? It's the crisis of not having enough technicians that has caused the change to actually start happening. And that's, I guess, a good thing, right? But on the flip side, we are going to continue to lose even more people. Our attrition is awful. We lose people from our industry more than a lot of trades. I hear it often from women, but I hear it from men too, that they started out in automotive and then went somewhere else. They became welders, they became airplane mechanics, they became elevator technicians and got paid twice as much with half as much tooling expense and education expense. It's kind of insane. And women particularly, we see them leave at like 3 or 4 years where it's just like, I don't love it enough, right? I don't love it enough to deal with all the crap. And it's all the crap that male technicians deal with, plus a whole nother layer of crap. But it's right. And you ask technicians, some absurd percentage of technicians would not recommend their own family members or children go into this field, right? That's a bad sign. Right? When our own industry is saying, oh, hell no, I don't want my kid doing this, that's not good. That means we're doing something wrong internally, that we are not instilling that sense of pride and that this is a valuable career path. And it is, and it can be, and it should be. And I have the conversation so frequently with people where I'm like, there are good shops out there. I promise. Like, just because the one you're at isn't, like, don't give up on the industry. There's some amazing shops and there's some amazing people. You just have to find them. Like, don't give up. But that's a hard conversation to have over and over and over again. Like, I swear there's good shops out there. Like, and I'm not just telling technicians, I'm telling consumers this too. Like, I swear there's good ones.
But the fact that we have to fight that hard to do that, right, is, I hope that's something that our industry sees and starts to shift a little bit, whether that's, maybe getting better managers in some of these places or, I don't know that I can put my finger on it, but there's in some ways, I think the generations prior to us kind of put us at a disadvantage where the labor rate was so low. The technicians had to buy their own tools right from the start. And, it's just kind of accumulated over the years to where now it's getting so advanced that not just any Joe Blow can go work on this stuff.
Yeah.
You need to be trained and you need to have the right tooling or you're just not going to be able to work on this stuff.
Yeah. It's almost like a whole different trade than it was, right? It is a totally different career than it was. Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to watch how this continues to unfold over the next couple of years, because there's a lot of challenges facing the industry, gender-wise, not just in general, consumer education, all of it. There's just so many layers. I think it's interesting, though. I feel like there's been a lot of grassroots movements, right? There's been a lot of like ground level, like conversations and things that are starting to like bubble up. And then we're starting to see upper management say, yeah, we've got to do things differently. For multiple reasons, right? Multiple ways. They're starting to have those conversations on the higher up level. The challenge that we're seeing is in this in-between space, right? We're like on the grassroots level, we're like, yeah, change needs to happen. Now upper management is saying, yeah, I agree, change needs to happen. It's the people who are making the decisions in the day-to-day that are actually affecting the lives of the customers and the folks who are working day-to-day in the shops, in the dealerships, at the manufacturing plants, whatever. Those folks haven't gotten the memo yet and haven't bought into the culture yet, right? And so while upper management can say, we need to change our culture, if middle management isn't implementing that yet, then the everyman isn't getting to experience that yet, no matter what upper management thinks. Does that make sense? Like, there's this disconnect there.
It totally does. And I still think we have room to grow on the executive level as well.
I said it was starting. I was being generous. It's starting.
Well, it's funny. I spoke at a conference probably, a month ago. And one of the questions that came up from the crowd, and it was a lot of dealer principals. And one of the dealer principals asked about, how do I show my fixed ops team and my technicians that I truly care about them? And my immediate response was, well, you actually have to care about them. Yeah. 100. I mean, it's so simple. It has to be authentic. And it's amazing when you actually do care about people, they feel it. Yeah.
They know it. They can tell because you actually care about them.
Yeah, it's not a check the box thing, right? Like it's actually getting to know their families and getting to know who they are.
Or how about that? I spoke at a manufacturers conference relatively a couple of years back, but relatively recently, and I was there to speak as a technician and on technician and whatnot. But it was a 3-day event, and not a single principal, not a single powerful person who was up on that stage said the word technician once. Technicians were not mentioned the entire time. They talked about their plans for the technology and the future and the customer and the dealer experience, how much money they were going to make and all of this, like all of the stuff. But technicians weren't talked about once. And it was like, oh, okay, so who's making all of this money for your company? Not a single mention about the technicians.
But it shows priorities, right? It
100% does.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. 100% does. And that's the challenge. And that's where that double-edged sword is. Like, we are worthy of respect, but we also have to act that way if we want it. And so my message is this twofold message, like, hey, universe, hey, world, the automotive industry is a phenomenal industry, and technicians are worthy of being respected and being valued. And my message is to the industry: get your shit together. Right?
I couldn't say it any better. I couldn't say it any better. I 100% echo what you're saying there, because it's the same thing that I experience, right? Where we're out there going to bat for the industry every single day, but in the back of our minds, we're not 100% sure that the industry is going to back up what we're saying, and it's
Totally. I feel like a fraud often. Like that's how I started one of my talks recently, was like, I have spent the better part of the last 15, 20 years advocating for the industry and telling moms and dads that this is a great career path for their little girl and their little boy to pursue, and that I made a great life for myself within this industry. But I feel like I'm lying to a degree, because 80% of the technicians that I know that are making the most money and have the most satisfaction in life stopped wrenching. Mm-hmm. They're making more money now, and they're having a better life now because they are no longer wrenching. And that makes me so horribly sad, because it can be a great career. It can be a phenomenal industry. It isn't always, but it can be. And so like, I love my industry to the extent that it is what it can be, and I hate it to the extent that it is not. And it's a challenge sometimes.
I feel your pain. I really do. And it almost feels like I'm venting here a little bit, but it's also, it is really true. And I think when we do go have those conversations and we do talk to people, we do want to have that confidence that if you happen to be the reason why a young person comes into this industry, that when they come into the industry, they're going to have a positive experience.
Right.
And again, it's not always that way. So hopefully by having these conversations, we can continue to kind of try to pull everybody up and really try to get our industry in a healthier position as a whole.
Absolutely. 100%. I think at the end of the day, like, it is our culture that determines everything. It is how we behave, both in the shop, towards each other, with our customers, with the person at the supermarket, like how we behave in all of our interactions every day. That is going to determine what the future of our industry looks like, and whether we could charge what we deserve to charge, whether we can be paid what we deserve to be paid, whether we get the respect that we so desperately deserve. But that is up to us. The future is up to every single one of us, how we behave, how we interact with the world, how we treat our customers, how we talk about our customers behind their backs, how we talk about each other behind their backs, or to each other, whether we play jokes on each other as technicians, whether we take that new kid under our wing, how we behave at parent-teacher conferences when we're interacting with other human beings who don't understand what the industry is. Like, all of those things matter. And we, as technicians, as shop owners, as service advisors, as just anybody within the automotive industry, like, it's up to us. So, like, what do you want your future to look like? What do you want the culture to be? And what's going to make you proud to be a part of this industry? And, like, make that happen. Make that culture.
Amen. Put that in my veins. That was amazing. that was really good. So I've got to end the show with, we've got about 5 minutes left.
Oh boy. Okay.
I want to talk about the show a little bit, and just how you approach the show. Very first and foremost, my first question is, do you get nervous before a show?
Like the TV show?
Yeah.
Or like this kind of show?
No, the TV show. I know you're not going to get nervous for this show. This is
I see it the same. I see it the same way. I don't get nervous before a show. It's really easy to forget that there's going to be lots of people watching it, because I'm just in a studio with some cameras and with Faye and like people who I've been working with for 13 years now. Right. So it's like, I don't know. It's really easy to not think about. I get more nervous doing public speaking. But that only lasts for like the first like couple of seconds. Like, I will be terribly nervous. Like, I get really bad stage fright. But then the minute I'm up on stage and I start talking, it goes away. And then it becomes just adrenaline and excitement, like riding a roller coaster, right? Like, you're terrified right before the roller coaster. And then like immediately you're like, oh my God, this is so much fun.
I love that response, and I think it's so honest. How do you come up with the projects?
So that is very varied. So on the show, sometimes they are projects that either Faye or I will recommend. We try to do things that are like things that we're passionate about and that we like working on, because it's going to be a better show if we like the content and what we're working on. Sometimes they are projects that are sourced locally. Sometimes people write in and say, hey, I've got this project. Is it something you'd want to do on the show? Sometimes it's sponsor driven. There'll be an advertiser on the show that is promoting a product, and then it's like, okay, find the car that's going to work with that project or that product. So it really depends. There's all sorts of different ways. There's not like a set way that vehicles or projects are sourced. But I mean, if you've watched the show, you've seen sometimes like Faye will bring a car on, or I'll bring a car on, or be some random person. So yeah, all over the place.
That's really, really cool. Where do you film the show at?
We film just outside of Tampa.
You do? Okay, so you're flying from Phoenix over, and how long does it take you to shoot a show?
Yeah, so we're generally there for about a week, and we work on more than one episode while we're there. But it's a TV and production. It's a very different thing, right? It's different than doing the work itself. And I struggle sometimes because it's like, I work in the real world too. And I'm like, yeah, there's no way that took 22 minutes to do. Like they make it look like it's so easy, right? Or like I'll be working on a project in my shop in Phoenix and be like, are you still working on that project? I'm like, yeah, because in real life, it takes longer than it does on TV. But we take on projects that we can finish in a shorter amount of time, or we know that we're showing just a small portion of it. But it'll take a couple of days to make an episode, versus like, you're taking a couple of days to make 22 minutes of TV. It's a totally different world than real life.
Do you have any stories of something that was like really, really hard on a job that you were doing, but you made it look really, really easy on TV?
All of them. But I know I say that kind of like jokingly, but it's kind of true. I mean, think about it though. Like nobody would watch a TV show where it's like, all right, finally got that bolt loose. Okay. Yep. Still unbolting this bolt. Yep. Wow. Every thread's fighting me. Whoop, yeah, this is a long bolt. Like nobody's gonna watch that show. So yeah, you'll see us like crack the bolt loose, and then the next thing you know, the part is out because you don't want to watch the whole thing. And we get criticized for that sometimes. We're like, you're not actually doing the work. They're just, magic people are doing it behind the scenes. I'm like, no, we're doing it. You just don't really want to watch that. It's boring. It's boring.
I think everybody can appreciate that. That's actually worked on something. There's always something that goes wrong. There's always something that is
totally
way more challenging than it should be.
So aftermarket parts never fit. Everything. It's the parts place gives you the wrong thing the first time. Like we know, it's never that smooth. And then in TV land, you add all these other layers because then it's like, all right, well, we started filming it, but then the camera was in the wrong place because they thought you were going to do something different. Then you just got to do it again. And then you messed up your words, so you got to do it again. And then a plane flew overhead, so now you got to do it again.
Patience.
Ridiculous, yeah.
Well, I can't tell you what a fan I am of you enough and what you're doing for the industry, how just incredibly talented you are in a bunch of different ways. And I think you just bring an entirely different vibe and something that's new and unique. And I think it does show that you can have a strong female in this business and they can be very, very successful. And I think everything that you've done over the course of your career is amazing. And it feels like you're just getting started. It feels like you've got such runway to do some really, really great things. So I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you. I appreciate your words. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun.
Thank you, Bogi.
That wraps up this week's episode of Beyond the Wrench. Be sure to tune in next week for another brand new episode. As a reminder, don't forget to rate and follow Beyond the Wrench on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps us get Beyond the Wrench in front of other fantastic shop owners managers, technicians, and dealers just like you, so we can continue to help improve, promote, and grow this amazing industry. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week.